It's August 2023 and I'm in a post-war rebuilt medieval marketplace, home to one of the at one time 5 town halls in the city of Braunschweig. Located on formerly marshy land around the River Ocker, the settlement of modern-day Braunschweig, anglicised to Brunswick, started at some point in the 9th century. The river was diverted to form a ring around the city centre, and wooden piles and reed mats helped to stabilise the land so it could be built upon. Up until the 12th century, the city was ruled by the Saxon noble family of the Brunonids before, through marriage, it fell to the House of Guelph, which ultimately ruled the city on and off until the final Duke of Brunswick, Ernst August, was forced to abdicate in November 1918 at the end of World War I. In 1142, Henry the Lion became the Duke of Saxony and made the city his capital. During the Middle Ages, Brunswick became an important centre of trade, a member of the Hanseatic League, and one of the economic and political centres of Northern Europe, with the Duchy of Brunswick a constituent state of the Holy Roman Empire. In 1806, the city fell to the French during the Napoleonic Wars and became part of the Kingdom of Westphalia. Following the Congress of Vienna, which divided up Europe following the final defeat of Napoleon, the Duchy of Brunswick was re-established, though its independence only lasted until 1871, when it became a constituent state of the German Empire. After the Landtag elections of 1930, Brunswick became the second state in Germany where the Nazis participated in government, and in 1932, the state of Brunswick granted the, at that point still Austrian, Adolf Hitler, German citizenship, opening the door for him to run in the 1932 German presidential election. Following the Nazi seizure of power the following year, the city became home to several state institutions, and the region became one of the centres of the German arms industry, which made Brunswick a target for Allied bombing raids. Up until October 15th, 1944, the old town of Brunswick was the largest homogeneous assemble of half-timbered houses in Germany. By the following morning, less than 10% of the city was still standing as an Allied air raid burnt the city to the ground in a firestorm. At the end of the war, the Free State of Brunswick, which had existed since the Duke's abdication in 1918, was dissolved into the newly formed Lower Saxony. Just 35 kilometres to the east, the border that divided the continent for the next 45 years fell, and Brunswick found itself in West Germany, cut off from the areas, now in East Germany, that it traditionally had strong economic ties to. The city's renaissance in many ways is linked to the city's palace, reduced to ruins during the bombing raids and left as an empty shell until the 1960s when it was finally torn down. In 2005, the first stones were laid on a rebuilding of the palace, which opened in 2007, the facade a faithful reconstruction of the 1841 palace, though inside it today houses a modern shopping centre rather than the halls of power of a dukedom. One wing of the rebuilt palace contains a small museum, housing reconstructions of some of the rooms that would have existed in the original palace, including a salon, music room, study, audience chamber, and a recreation of the throne room. Though the 1841 palace isn't actually the original palace, as the current Schloss is the fourth version of the building on the site. Work on the original palace was started in 1718, with the palace being occupied by the dukes from 1753. That building was burnt down during anti-monarchy riots in 1830. The second version was completed in 1841, though on the night of February 24, 1865, a technical defect of a stove caused a massive fire that destroyed the north wing and the northwestern part of the main building, requiring the palace to be rebuilt. That third version lasted up until the third fire and destruction during the Allied bombing raids of World War II. Left unprotected against the weather, the ruins deteriorated, and by 1960, the only option was to demolish the remains and turn the area into a park until the construction of the Schlossgarten from 2005. The reconstructed rooms inside the museum give an impression of how the inside of the palace would have looked, pulled from the original construction plans of the 1841 palace. The throne room is an even closer reconstruction, as samples of the wall fabrics and carpets were found in the archives, and so these could be recreated exactly. In a slightly worrying turn of events, whilst I was in Brunswick, the palace had a fourth attempt at burning itself down, though this time the local fire brigade got it under control quickly. Located between the palace and the heart of the old town of Brunswick is the current Rathaus or town hall, built between 1894 and 1900 to replace the old town hall located deeper into the Altstadt. The Rathaus backs onto the remains of the Dankwarderode Castle. A castle has existed on this site since at least the 11th century, though the current building is a late 19th, early 20th century reconstruction of a 17th century Renaissance-style castle that was built on the site. The castle forms one side of the Burgplatz, the centre point of the city, surrounded by other important buildings, including the city's cathedral, the Braunschweiger Dom. At the time of visiting, the Burgplatz was being used as an arena for open-air opera performances, so only a part of the square was visible. But a small model located in the southwestern corner of the square shows the layout of the buildings in this part of the city, including the town hall, castle and cathedral. Officially, the Cathedral Church of St. Blaise in Brunswick, the Braunschweiger Dom, was founded in 1173 by Henry the Lion, the Duke of Bavaria in Saxony, opposite his castle. The cathedral still houses the mortal remains of Henry and his second wife, Matilda of England. The Nazis took an interest in the crusading nature of Henry, including some of his persecution of Slavic people fitting with Nazi ideology, so the cathedral was turned into a national shrine, stripping the building of anything that had been added since the days of Henry and removing all Christian worship elements of the building. Surprisingly, given the damage meted out to the rest of the city in the Allied bombing raids, the cathedral only suffered slight damage, and so, following the end of the war, the building was quickly returned to its purpose as a place of worship, with most of the Nazi design changes reversed. Underneath the main altar is the crypt of the church, which houses the remains of the Dukes of Brunswick from the 17th to the 19th century, along with the relocated remains of some of the predecessors of Henry the Lion that were relocated to the cathedral after its construction from other churches. In the lowest part of the crypt, and beneath the monument above it on the church floor, are the stone coffins of Henry and Matilda. Less than 500 metres from the cathedral and the Burgplatz is the Altstadtmarkt and Altstadtrathaus, the market and town hall of the Old Town. Originally, the city had been divided into 5 boroughs, each with their own town hall, market square and cathedral. The area that is today's Altstadt was the wealthiest of these boroughs, and when they eventually merged into a single city, this borough's town hall became the city's town hall. Most of the buildings were gutted by fire during the air raids of World War II, but the facades of the Church of St. Martini, the town hall and the cloth hall survived and were able to be rebuilt, along with a relocated and reconstructed half-timber house to give a view of what the area would have looked like before the near-total destruction of the city. Today, the Altstadtrathaus is part of the City Museum, housing various exhibits. On the entry floor, there's an exhibition on the industrial history of the city. As well as a model of how the city would have looked in the 16th century, complete with the 5 different borough markets, town halls and churches. The lower floor charts the story of the city from prehistory through to the Second World War. Just beyond the Old Town is the Alte Waage, or Old Scale. The building was originally built in 1534 as a storage and weighing house on the Wool Market, but by 1671 the building was no longer being used as a weighing house and had started to fall into disrepair. It was extensively repaired in 1854, though not to the original historical structure, the errors in this repair finally being reversed in a renovation that took place between 1937 and 1939 in preparation to turn the building into the home for the Hitler Youth. The building survived most of the war without any damage, but on February 10, 1944, it received several direct hits, and the remains were totally destroyed in the firestorm that swept through the city following the October 15, 1944 bombing raid. After the war, the rubble was removed and the land levelled, and the space was used as a marketplace and parking lot for several decades. Reconstruction work started in 1991, with the work being carried out as true as possible to the original building, including only using wooden dowels and joints rather than nails or screws in the framework. The reconstruction was completed in 1994, and today it houses the administration and training building of the city's adult education centre. The Herzog Anton Ulrich Museum was one of the first museums in Germany to open to the public, throwing its doors open in 1754, just a year after the British Museum in London. The museum was renamed to its current name in 1927 after its founder Anton Ulrich, the Duke of Braunschweig. The founding collection is based on the Art and Natural History Cabinet of Duke Charles I, a private collection of art, historic artefacts and curiosities that the Duke had collected. Over the years, the collection has been expanded on and today has around 4,000 works on display. The museum occupied various buildings in its early years before it moved to its current location in 1887, with the building surviving the Second World War relatively unscathed, though it did mean that as an intact structure, the side wings of the museum were requisitioned for use by the British military government between 1945 and 1949. The building was completely renovated and refurbished in the early years of the 21st century, fully reopening in October 2016. Today, the upper floor houses the sculptures and applied art artefacts of the collection. Whilst the first floor houses the picture galleries arranged in themes. A short distance away from the main building of the museum is the State Natural History Museum, which can trace its roots back to the same ducal art and natural history cabinet. The two collections were split, and eventually the natural history collection found its way into its current home in 1937. Knowing how to attract the crowds, the outside of the museum is home to a collection of dinosaur models. Inside, there are a number of dioramas showing taxidermised animals in the kinds of environment they'd like to be found in. Though some of them being perhaps a little more realistic than they need to be. Upstairs, the museum also houses the skeletons of a couple of dinosaurs. Whilst in the basement, there's a small aquarium and terrarium. The Benedictine monastery of St Mary and St Aegidien was founded in 1115 and survived up until the Reformation, with the monastery being abolished in 1543. In the following centuries, the buildings had various uses, including as a prison, execution site and concert hall. In 1902, the Fatherland Museum moved into the site, which eventually became the Brunswick State Museum. Following the Second World War, the former church buildings that formed part of the site were converted back into a church and set up as the city's main Catholic place of worship, leaving the museum with a smaller space than before, resulting in them opening a new museum on the Burgplatz. But the museum retained the monastery rooms and its exhibition space, and to house a very important part of their collection. In 1924, with the Jewish population of Brunswick already declining, synagogues were being closed as there was no longer a community to support them. To preserve the history, the fittings of one of the synagogues were donated to the museum and went on display. Over the following years, a number of Jewish families donated other objects related to their worship and culture to the museum. As they were treated as museum objects, they managed to avoid the destruction that the Nazis carried out on all other Jewish property, and after the war were put back on display inside the chapel of the monastery, giving an insight into the Jewish population of the city in the years before the rise of the Nazis. Braunschweig Hauptbahnhof has regular regional express trains to Hanover Hauptbahnhof, taking just under the hour to make the journey, where it's possible to connect to Hanover Airport, which has connections across much of Europe. High-speed ICE trains run every other hour to Berlin, taking around 90 minutes, where it's possible to connect to Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, and in the opposite direction to Frankfurt in 3 hours, where you can connect to Frankfurt Airport, Germany's largest and most connected airport and one of Europe's major hubs, with flights across the globe.